the surroundings fell quite silent. All of them were waiting for Shi Tian's decision. At this moment, both Xianxia's side and the Undying Race's side didn't fear the God Race. Could be said that the God Race was in a truly impossible situation. Suddenly, Shi Tian gazed at Master Tian. Yang Yi is an arrogant and ruthless person, but so long as someone doesn't offend him, he won't offend anyone. However, your Undying Race treats the other races and my God Race as ants. As far as you're concerned, killing is right and just. So, if I listen to you, you won't spare my God Race even if I can kill Yang Yi. Shi Tian slowly closed his eyes at this point. Bang! A terrifying aura swept out from him, and it was like a storm that instantly swept toward the surroundings. Hiss! 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 Space instantly started trembling. Master Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he clenched his fists. Divine Generals! Shi Tian howled with fury. 10 black-robed experts and 10 white-robed experts from the God Race appeared by Shi Tian's side. An instant later, their auras rose madly. The rest of you leave now. Shi Tian howled with fury, and then the stomachs of all 21 of them started expanding. An instant later, Shi Tian led the other 20 in a charge at Master Tian and the 9 undead warriors. When they arrived around 300 m away, Shi Tian and the others suddenly exploded apart. In an instant, 21 terrifying waves of energy surged and enveloped Master Tian and the undead warriors. Let's go! Meanwhile, someone shouted among the God Race, and then countless of them instantly knelt in the direction of Shi Tian's group before charging madly toward the portal. Yang Yi glanced at them, and then he gazed in the direction of Shi Tian's group. At this moment, that area was pitch black and shocking explosions were resounding incessantly from there. Just like that, around 15 minutes passed before the space there calmed down. Master Tian and the 9 undead warriors were still there, but Shi Tian's group of 21 had vanished. Self-detonation. They were gone. Shi Tian and the other experts of the God Race had detonated themselves and forcefully kept Master Tian's group occupied. However, not all the people of the God Race were able to get through. At this moment, Master Tian's countenance was extremely pale. While he'd survived, the explosion had heavily injured him. He'd suffered truly heavy injuries. Even if Shi Tian was inferior in strength to him, it was a very tiny gap, and Shi Tian had detonated himself to attack Master Tian. So he was lucky to have even survived. The undead warriors behind him hadn't been affected much because while the other 20 divine generals of the God Race had detonated themselves too, their strength was much more inferior when compared to Shi Tian. So they merely suffered light injuries. Master Tian glanced coldly at the people of the God Race who were still going into the portal, and then he waved his right hand with the intent of giving the order. However, the martial emperor suddenly appeared in front of him. The martial emperor glanced at Master Tian. Shi Tian died bravely, so I'll allow the rest of them to pass through. As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful wave of pressure slammed down upon Master Tian and the others. Master Tian glanced behind him, and he noticed that everyone from the Undying Race had gone through. So, a cold smile arose on his face. I'm afraid it's a little too late. The martial emperor frowned slightly. Suddenly, the teleportation formation dimmed down. The formation was deactivating. The remaining people charged madly into the portal when they realized that the formation was being deactivated. Master Tian and the others didn't try to stop them. The martial emperor glanced coldly at Master Tian's group, and then he gazed at Yang Yi and Nanjing. Shall we go? Go? Yang Yi was stunned. Indeed. And Nanjing and him could go into the portal with the martial emperor, and Master Tian's group wouldn't be able to stop them, unless they were willing to sacrifice their lives. However, Yang Yi shook his head. I'm not leaving. The martial emperor frowned. Why? Yang Yi shot a glance behind him, and it was in the direction of Void Spirit Continent. Xianxia was still there. Yang Yi spoke softly. I promised her that I would come back. Her? Master Tian spoke coldly. The formation is deactivating, and our patriarch is free to act now. Our patriarch is probably on the way to Void Spirit Continent right now. Void Spirit Maiden is dead. Yang Yi gazed at a Nanjing, and she said, I'm going with you. Yang Yi said. You can leave. She shook her head in response. Yang Yi took a deep breath. Then let's go. And Nanjing and him vanished into the distance. The martial emperor nodded slightly. He's quite loyal, but it's such a pity. He walked over to the teleportation formation, and it was about to close completely. Meanwhile, Master Tian and the others didn't stop the martial emperor. As far as they were concerned, it was best if the martial emperor left because they would have one less enemy. The martial emperor's strength could be described as something only Xiao Lu or their patriarch could go against. Right when the martial emperor was about to walk into the portal, he suddenly stopped and looked up into space. The starry sky was endless. He gazed at it for a very, very long time. Suddenly, he started laughing, and his laughter reverberated like a thunderclap. A short while later, his figure trembled, and then he tore open the space before him and vanished into the starry sky, tearing through space. In the end, the martial emperor hadn't chosen to use the portal and chose to tear through space instead. Master Tian glanced at the martial emperor and spoke indifferently. He's courting death, tearing through space to the initial race's universe? The boundless universe is huge, and the slightest mistake will get him lost, and that will bring him eternal damnation. He really overestimates himself. It was possible to teleport through space by tearing through it. Many experts could accomplish that, but it was through known expanses of space. However, the martial emperor and the unfettered one had chosen to travel through unknown expanses of space. It was like a mouse suddenly jumping into the ocean and searching for a way out. It was no different than courting death. Meanwhile, Master Tian's expression changed abruptly, and he gazed at the portal and frowned slightly. Why have I lost contact with Master Gue? As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly withdrew a pitch-black rock, and it flickered with black light, but there was nothing special about it. Suddenly, it flickered, and a weak voice came from within it. There's no more came from the rock after that word. Master Tian frowned while a wisp of worry flashed through his eyes. A short while later, he spoke solemnly. Go to Void Spirit Continent. We must deal with Void Spirit Maiden and the rest as soon as possible. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot with the others. Meanwhile, there were many here who hadn't been able to enter the portal. There were people from the other races and the God race. All of them had failed to enter the portal in time. They had despair all over their faces. They were dead. Their fate was sealed. At this moment, the spirit energy in the large universe was so scarce it could practically be considered as being non-existent. But they were still here, so the consequence was obvious. Suddenly, one of them stepped forward. Everyone! They gazed at the man, and the man spoke fiercely. It's the undying race. It's the undying race who pushed us into this corner. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be in this situation. Since we're going to die anyway, let's fight them to the death. Everyone we kill counts, and it's better than suffering and dying slowly. If you're a man, then come with me to Void Spirit Continent, and let's fight the undying race with Yang Yi. As soon as he finished speaking, the young man vanished into the distance. Let's go. Meanwhile, someone else stepped forward. He's right. Since we're dying anyway, isn't it better to drag some of them with us? If worse comes to worse, we can just detonate ourselves. I'm going to drag one of them down with me. Ha. He vanished into the distance as well. It didn't take long for more and more to step forward and charge toward Void Spirit Continent. In just a short while, the area was empty. Death. Everyone was afraid of death. No one wasn't afraid of it. However, many were still quite courageous. Or perhaps their courage had been concealed due to various reasons. But when they were pushed into a hopeless situation where death was certain, a person who was even afraid of death would be the most courageous. Countless rushed toward Void Spirit Continent. All of them were very well aware that they would die if they went there, but they were still going. Void Spirit Continent. Xianxia and the spirits of the Void Spirit race were still in confrontation with the Undying Race's army. They were waiting. The Undying Race was waiting for their people to leave so that their patriarch would be free to join the battle, and Xianxia was waiting for Yang Yi and the others to leave. Finally, A powerful aura appeared above the continent. Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, the entire continent started to collapse, and everything started transforming into dust. Xianxia opened her eyes. It's time. It was daytime, but the sky above Void Spirit Continent was dark. Once the energy appeared there, the entire continent collapsed in just a short while and was transformed into dust. Xianxia didn't stop it from collapsing. The members of the Void Spirit race weren't on Void Spirit Continent anymore, so its existence didn't make a difference to her. It didn't take long for a middle-aged man in a black robe to suddenly appear in front of Xiaolu. The middle-aged man wore a mask, and he kept his left hand behind his back while his right held a scroll. The experts of the Undying race bowed respectfully to him. Patriarch, the patriarch of the Undying race. The middle-aged man with the scroll was the patriarch of the Undying race, Feng Yihan. It sounded like the name of a scholar, but only people who knew him were aware of how terrifying he was. Feng Yihan sized up Xianxia and spoke softly. Void Spirit Maiden. Long time no see. Xianxia appeared before him, sized him up and said, Looks like you've been recovering well. Feng Yihan replied, Almost 90%. Xianxia nodded slightly. Then let's put an end to the enmity between us today. Feng Yihan fell silent for a moment and nodded. All right, peace. It did not exist. The enmity between them was one of annihilation, and it was an enmity that was absolutely irreconcilable, unless one side was exterminated. Feng Yihan gazed at Xiaolu, and the latter nodded slightly before leading the army at the spirits of the Void Spirit race. Meanwhile, Xianxia flipped her right hand, and a pearl appeared there. A moment later, she tapped it, and it entered the army of spirits. In an instant, their auras rose explosively. The initial race. Feng Yihan spoke softly before Xianxia. I didn't expect you to be able to obtain that from the initial race, but it does make sense. You're all alone now and have nothing to worry about. So the initial race has no choice but to make a compromise. Xianxia didn't say a word, but netherworld destiny slowly emerged from her forehead. It only took a moment for it to appear in her grasp. She looked up at Feng Yihan and was about to attack when she suddenly frowned slightly. She looked to the right, and she saw a ray of sword energy and a ray of fiery light shooting in her direction. Xianxia's face fell. It only took a while for Yang Yi and a Nanjing to appear before her. Yang Yi was about to speak when Xianxia spoke coldly. What are you doing here? To give your life away. And you're even leading your wife to her death too. Yang Yi replied, I told you that I would be back. She closed her eyes slowly. It's meaningless. Yang Yi shook his head. I can't let you shoulder this burden on your own. She opened her eyes and gazed at him. It is my Void Spirit race's business, so it's my business and should be shouldered by me. Yang Yi waved his hand and interrupted her. I'm already here, so it's pointless to say all of that, isn't it? She gazed at him for a long time, and then she suddenly started smiling. Yang Yi was puzzled. Why are you smiling? Xianxia walked over to Yang Yi, floated up slowly, and then patted him on the shoulder. I'm very happy to have been able to get to know you and Snowy after waking up. It's both of you who gave me joy for some time. Just as you've said, there's nothing for me to say since you're here already. She gazed at the battlefield below and said, Help me kill Xiaolu. Yang Yi was stunned, and so was in Nanjing. Kill Xiaolu. Xiaolu was an expert on Yang Wudi's level, and his strength could be said to be the strongest below the Unfettered One, Xianxia, and the patriarch of the Undying race. Even the Martial Emperor and Yang Wudi wouldn't dare to say that they could kill Xiaolu. But Xianxia wanted Yang Yi to kill Xiaolu. She's doing it for your own good. Suddenly, Feng Yihan said, If you kill him, you're very likely to make a breakthrough and take a step forward. Of course, there's also another outcome, and it's death. So, do you want to try? Xianxia looked Yang Yi in the eyes and said, Since you're here, you have no other choice. Kill him and take a step forward. Only then can you leave with your life. Otherwise, even I can't keep you safe. Yang Yi frowned slightly. Xianxia, what are you saying? She shook her head slightly. Just do as I say. I won't harm you. Yang Yi fell silent for a moment and nodded. All right. Yang Ye's figure transformed into a ray of light that shot at Xiao Lu. And Nanjing was about to follow him, but Tian Xiu stopped her. Tian Xiu pointed at 30 mysterious figures with bows on their backs. Tian Xiu said, "They are your opponents." And Nanjing spoke solemnly, "I want to help him." Tian Xiu spoke softly, "Going to him will only harm him. He must achieve a breakthrough, otherwise all of you will die. All the others who went to the universe of the initial race will die too." And Nanjing fell silent for a long time, and then she charged at those 30 experts. She didn't ask anything. She just chose to believe in Yang Yi. Meanwhile, Fenghan spoke abruptly, "Stop now and leave with them. No one will be able to harm all of you." Tian Xiu closed her eyes slowly. "I told him to leave, yet he returned. It's a path he chose. Since he chose this path, he has to take it until the end. As for me, I've chosen my path too. We don't have a way out anymore. So, let's fight." Hiss! A ray of dark light shot up into space. Bang! The entire universe shook at this moment. Fenghan pondered deeply for a moment and nodded. "All of us have no way out." As soon as he finished speaking, the space before him started breaking down into threads. Breaking down space. Every single thread of space contained extremely terrifying energy that was sufficient to obliterate the world. Meanwhile, a ray of dark light tore through space. Hiss! 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 That expanse of space suddenly started burning and being obliterated, layer by layer. At the same time, faint mist appeared here. In just a short while, the mist converged into a dark green river, and even the black hole in space was obliterated by the river. The Nether Springs. The black hole was transformed into a place of death. It was true destruction of the universe's core. Feng Yihan nodded slightly. The Netherworld Destiny and Nether Springs. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure transformed into countless rays of black energy that vanished on the spot. The battle up above erupted. However, the people below couldn't sense any of it. Meanwhile, down below, Nanjing arrived before the 30 experts, but just a moment later, 30 black arrows shot at her. Nanjing's eyes narrowed slightly, and she slammed Burning Fury down. Bang! The arrows before her were instantly blasted away, but Nanjing was pushed over 10 kilometers back too. As soon as she stopped herself, a black arrow suddenly appeared before her forehead. Nanjing's reaction was instantaneous, and she grabbed with her left hand. However, hiss! An arrow pierced through her left shoulder. At the same time, many more arrows had appeared before her stomach, the back of her head, and various other vital points around her body. Every arrow was aimed at a vital point. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly relaxed her grip, and the arrow before her forehead shot forward like a bolt of lightning. However, Nanjing was gone. Hiss! A strand of flaming light suddenly appeared before those 30 figures, and then a spear swept horizontally at them. But it stopped just halfway of the entire arc because 30 arrows had stabbed against it. Bang! The powerful force they carried blasted Nanjing over 30 kilometers away. They stood in the distance with their bows in hand and auras completely merged as one, and all of them were locked onto Nanjing. Once she stopped herself, Nanjing wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth. She knew she'd underestimated them. While they couldn't compare to those 10 undead warriors, they weren't much weaker. Nanjing fell silent for an instant, and then a vicious glow flashed through her eyes. She grabbed her ponytail with her left hand and wrapped it around her neck, and then she kicked Burning Fury with her right leg. Bang! It transformed into a flaming ray of light that shot at them. Meanwhile, Nanjing stomped her right foot down and followed closely behind Burning Fury. Not too far away, Yang Yi withdrew his gaze from Nanjing. He didn't shoot another glance at her because he had confidence in her. She grew stronger the more she fought. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and gazed at Xiao Lu. The latter grinned. "What? You want to fight me? Are you aware of the gap between us?" Yang Yi shook his head. Xiao Lu grinned. "I understand what Void Spirit Maiden is trying to do. She wants to put you in a life and death situation so that you can overcome it. Unfortunately, I'm your opponent. He tapped his finger forward once he finished speaking. Bang! A wave of powerful energy blasted Yang Yi extremely far away. Once he stopped himself, blood started seeping out from both sides of his mouth. Xiao Lu chuckled. Do you realize the size of the gap between us now? Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. A moment of silence ensued before Yang Yi opened them and looked at Xiao Lu again. Yang Yi's eyes were blood red. He wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth and took a step forward. 3 attacks. If I can't kill you with 3 attacks, then I, Yang Yi, will take my own life. Bang! Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, 2 types of intent surged out from within him. Peak slaughter intent and peak sword intent. A moment later, they started to ignite in flames. Intent ignition. Ignition of progenitor realm slaughter intent and sword intent. How could he fight Xiao Lu? As far as Yang Yi was concerned, the gap between them was too huge. They weren't from the same era, nor were they at the same level. But Tianxiu wanted him to kill Xiao Lu. How? Yang Yi had no choice but to put his life on the line. Intent ignition. He hadn't used it in a very, very long time, because it really was too detrimental. The price of it was just too heavy. Even he wasn't really able to endure such a price. But he had no other choice now. He couldn't delay the battle with Xiao Lu, because the longer he delayed, the greater the possibility that he would die in the end. So, he had to use his full strength from the very beginning. He couldn't hold back at all. Intent ignition. Both intents burned madly, and Yang Ye's aura rose explosively as a result. Xiao Lu's eyes narrowed slightly. Intent ignition. He naturally understood what it was. Yang Yi could be said to be sacrificing his intent to improve his strength. As far as Xiao Lu was concerned, it was an irregular means of gaining strength, and while it would provide great strength in the short term, the price was huge. It was usually not something people could bear. So, as far as he was concerned, Yang Yi was courting death. Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot, and he was above Xiao Lu when he appeared again. A moment later, a sword slashed down. Xiao Lu's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't underestimate Yang Yi. He twisted his right hand, and a strand of black energy surged up into the air and slammed against Yang Ye's sword. Hiss! Yang Ye's sword instantly sliced the black energy apart on contact and continued down. Bang! Xiao Lu was blasted over 10 kilometers away. Xiao Lu glanced at his palm, and he noticed that half of it was gone. Yang Ye's sword had sliced off half his palm. Meanwhile, a sword howl resounded once more. Along with the sword howl, Yang Yi transformed into a string of afterimages that appeared before Xiao Lu, and then he swung his sword down again. His sword seemed like it could even slice open the world, and its aura couldn't be compared to any attack Yang Yi had launched in the past. Xiao Lu took a step back, and then countless strands of black energy surged out from within him. In an instant, the black energy enveloped Yang Ye's sword. However, they were instantly sliced into bits, and the sword slammed down once more. Bang! Xiao Lu was blasted away again. However, Xiao Lu chuckled. He gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi, I have to admit that you're quite strong now. Unfortunately, it's impossible for you to kill me. Now, you have just one last attack. You... Suddenly, Xiao Lu's voice stopped abruptly, because Yang Yi had appeared in front of him, and another attack was descending. A cold smile arose on the corners of Xiao Lu's mouth. In an instant, countless strands of death energy converged above him and formed a barrier. He was very confident that he could defend himself against this attack because he'd gained a full understanding of Yang Ye's strength through the last 2 attacks. Yang Yi was strong, but Yang Yi wasn't a huge threat to him. It didn't take long for Yang Ye's sword to arrive above the barrier of death energy. However, Yang Ye's sword suddenly paused for a moment, and then Yang Ye's features warped. Meanwhile, Xiao Lu's expression changed drastically, and countless strands of death energy converged madly from within him. But it was too late. Yang Ye's sword descended. Hiss! The barrier of death energy was like paper that the sword instantly sliced open, and the sword sliced down from Xiao Lu's head to feet. The surroundings fell silent. Yang Yi withdrew his sword and moved 300 m away. Xiao Lu stared blankly at Yang Yi. That was a domain? A domain! Yang Yi had used the sword domain just now. The sword domain. It was Yang Ye's greatest trump card. In the beginning, he hadn't used the sword domain against Xiao Lu because he was very well aware that he couldn't use it to kill Xiao Lu in an instant. Just the sword domain couldn't kill Xiao Lu. So he'd chosen to ignite his intent. Once he ignited both his intents, his strength had instantly risen countless times. At this moment, the might of his attack that was enhanced by the sword domain would be unprecedentedly terrifying. Moreover, in order to make Xiao Lu lower his guard, Yang Yi hadn't used the sword domain for his first two attacks, because Xiao Lu was the most vigilant then. This battle wasn't just a battle of strength, it was a mental battle too. Simply speaking, it was a battle of tricks. Xiao Lu stared at Yang Yi. An instant later, he suddenly started laughing. I didn't expect that I would die at the hands of a sage. Needless to say, you're amazing and very talented. Your sword domain is powerful, very powerful. His voice grew softer and softer, and it gradually vanished. Xiao Lu's body was gradually turning ethereal too, but it didn't take long for countless strands of death energy to converge on him. He wasn't coming back to live, and the death energy was merely protecting his corpse. The undying race did possess an undying body, but it depended on the situation. Yang Ye's attack had obliterated all the vitality within him. Under such circumstances, not to mention the undying body, no one could save him. Xiao Lu was dead. However, Yang Yi had paid a terrible price too. Intent was once just an ethereal concept, yet it wasn't ethereal anymore. Could be seen, touched, and truly existed in material form. Yang Yi had ignited two intents. So, simply speaking, he had released all the intent he possessed, completely, and then ignited it all to gain strength. Even then, it wasn't impossible for Yang Yi to regain the intent he'd lost. It was like a rich man who'd made 10 million, but he lost all that money on gambling. Even then, it didn't represent that the rich man would never earn another 10 million. Losing the money didn't represent he'd lost the ability to earn money. It was the same for Yang Yi. He was absolutely familiar with the sword Dao and slaughter Dao, so he just needed a fortuitous encounter to regain his intents to their peaks. Now, Yang Yi was facing a problem, a different problem. He was facing the backlash from the intent ignition and sword domain. The backlash had already begun. There was naturally a price to pay for using strength that exceeded one's limits. Veins started to pop up on Yang Ye's face. Besides that, the blood vessels beneath his skin were starting to wriggle. Yang Yi took a deep breath and looked down. The army of spirits from the Void Spirit race were in battle with the Undying race's army, and it wouldn't take long for the outcome to be determined. Yang Yi looked to the other side, and Nanjing was in fierce battle with the 30 bow-wielding experts. No, there were only 25 left now, and Nanjing had killed 5 of them, but Nanjing was heavily injured as a result. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly, and then he suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot at them. Die! A voice resounded like a thunderclap. It was Yang Ye's voice. As soon as he arrived before them, he swung his sword with his right hand. The sword domain. At this moment, the strength he gained from intent ignition had not vanished yet, so he used the sword domain again. So, how terrifying was his attack? The black-robed figure before him was instantly obliterated before his sword. An instant kill. And Nanjing was stunned by this. She was shocked that Yang Yi had become so strong. However, it only took a moment for quite an unsightly expression to appear on her face, because she'd realized the state he was in. Yang Yi was overexhausting himself right now. Yang Yi could kill anyone now, but it wouldn't be long before Yang Yi had to pay a terrible price. Meanwhile, after he killed that black-robed figure in an instant, Yang Yi transformed into a ray of light that shot at another one of them. Over 20 arrows suddenly appeared before Yang Yi, but along with a swing of his sword, all of them were obliterated. Hiss! A moment later, a black-robed figure was sliced into 2, and then blood and internal organs sprayed all over the surroundings. But that wasn't the end of it. A ray of light flashed, and then the head of another black-robed figure flew up into the air. A slaughter. At this moment, Yang Yi was slaughtering them. None of them could resist a single swing of Yang Ye's sword. Even if they joined forces, Yang Yi could overcome their joint forces with a swing of his sword. In his current state, even an expert like the martial emperor couldn't kill him. In just a short while, only 10 of those black figures remained. Meanwhile, Yang Yi stopped. The backlash, the pain. At this moment, Yang Yi felt like his body was on the verge of exploding. Even the primordial violet energy that was madly repairing his body couldn't reduce the pain he experienced. Swoosh! Suddenly, an arrow pierced through his chest. The primordial armor couldn't stop it at all. However, that wasn't the end of it. Another arrow shot toward Yang Ye's forehead, but it was slammed away by a spear before it could even approach Yang Yi. And Nanjing stood before him. Yang Yi used both hands to support himself with his sword, and he gasped for breath. I don't think I'll be able to hold on this time. Jay, just go. He was utterly exhausted. At this moment, he was truly exhausted. And Nanjing turned around, gazed at Yang Yi for a long time, and then she squatted down and pecked him on the forehead. We die together. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around, and then her body started to burn. Soul ignition. In an instant, and Nanjing's aura rose explosively. At this critical moment, a palm suddenly pressed down on a Nanjing's shoulder, and then a voice entered her ear. I don't want to die yet. And Nanjing stopped. The faint flames around her were extinguished. It was Yang Yi who'd said those words. She turned to the side and saw a ghastly pale face. Yang Yi took her hand and cracked a smile. Don't do something stupid. I don't want to die yet. All right? She gazed at him for a long time and nodded. All right. Meanwhile, 10 arrows shot over from afar. And Nanjing turned to the side and swung blazing fury in a horizontal sweep. Bang! The arrows were stopped in their path, but Nanjing and Yang Yi were blasted over 3 kilometers away. Meanwhile, those 10 experts were about to attack again when Yang Yi suddenly pulled Nanjing behind him, and the sword supreme in his grasp let out a sword howl. The figures of those 10 experts stiffened slightly. They hadn't forgotten how Yang Yi had slaughtered their companions. Yang Yi raised his hands slowly and pointed his sword at them. Continue if you want to die. They didn't cower before him. They drew their bows at the exact same time and released their arrows. 10 arrows simultaneously flashed forward like shooting stars. Yang Ye's ghastly pale face turned ferocious at this instant, and he stomped his right foot down. Bang! The space beneath him instantly collapsed. Meanwhile, Yang Yi relied on the counterforce to shoot forward. The arrows were instantly obliterated before him, and he appeared above one of them. The sword supreme descended. At the instant that happened, a mouthful of blood sprayed from Yang Ye's mouth. The sword domain. He'd used the sword domain again. Hiss! The black-robed expert didn't even have the chance to resist before he was instantly sliced into 2. But at the exact same instant, numerous arrows appeared before Yang Yi. At the critical moment, Yang Yi moved his head to the side and dodged 2 of them, but the rest pierced through his chest. Bang! Yang Yi was blasted far away. As soon as he stopped himself, a few more arrows shot at him. Meanwhile, Nanjing appeared before Yang Yi, and she waved burning fury in a horizontal sweep. Bang! 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 The arrows were blasted away, but so were Yang Yi and her. The 9 remaining experts didn't stop. They drew their bows again and planned to release another volley at Yang Yi and Nanjing. However, a few black shadows suddenly descended from the sky. They were Master Tian and the 9 undead warriors, and Nanjing's face fell from the sight of this. Now they really had no chance. Meanwhile, a black-robed figure appeared before them. It was the universe sprite. She closed her eyes slowly and said, "Tell him to take good care of Snowy and the sprites of this large universe. Otherwise, I won't forgive him, even in death." She slowly raised both her hands once she finished speaking. Hiss! 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 In an instant, the space here started rippling, and then countless strands of energy converged from all over the world. More and more converged until it was like a myriad of rivers converging into the ocean as they converged into the universe sprite. If someone looked down from outside the large universe, one would notice that the large universe was being destroyed at a visible rate. She was taking the last bit of spirit energy and power the large universe had. And Nanjing gazed at her with astonishment. You? The universe sprite removed her mask slowly, and beneath it was an ethereal face. This ethereal face had a bleak smile on it. In any case, the large universe is dead, and I'm just killing it completely. From now onward, this large universe will cease to exist. As soon as she finished speaking, her body turned completely ethereal. Boom! A moment later, a terrifying wave of energy swept out from her, and she instantly vanished. The energy instantly swept over to Master Tion's group and enveloped them. Boom! 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 Rumbling explosions resounded incessantly. The universe sprite had used herself as the medium to converge the last remaining energy within the large universe. It could be said to have instantly sped up the speed at which the large universe was dying. Actually, it hadn't just sped it up, it had killed the large universe completely. However, she's used that energy to release an absolutely destructive wave of energy. It was so strong that it caused that expanse of space to turn into an expanse of death. There was no matter at all there, only destruction. However, Master Tion's group hadn't been annihilated. The 9 archers were gone, but Master Tion and the 9 undead warriors were still alive. Especially those 9 undead warriors. Their joint forces were even capable of killing Xiaolu. While they had survived, they were heavily injured. The universe sprite's attack was no different than a self-detonation. Master Tion wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and looked up at Yang Yi and Nanjing. Yang Yi, I didn't expect Lord Xiaolu to die at your hands. Yang Yi didn't say anything as he stood behind Nanjing. At this moment, he was madly utilizing primordial violet energy to heal himself. As for Nanjing, she stood before him and gazed coldly at Master Tion's group without revealing the slightest fear. Master Tion walked closer to them and said, "Who can save you now?" Bang! Suddenly, a strand of flames appeared here. Master Tion's expression changed slightly, and he instantly moved 3 kilometers away. A ball of flames floated not too far away from Yang Yi. It was the Samadhi flame. Master Tion had a wisp of fear in his eyes as he gazed at the Samadhi flame. While Yang Yi had used the Samadhi flame in the past, he'd only used its strength, and that was far inferior when compared to the Samadhi flame itself. The Samadhi flame itself felt dangerous to Master Tion. The Samadhi flame transformed into a middle-aged man, and the middle-aged man had blazing flames around him. He glanced at Yang Yi and said, "I'm leaving." Yang Yi opened his eyes to gaze at the Samadhi flame, and the latter pondered deeply for a moment and said, "If it were just them, I wouldn't mind paying a certain price. Unfortunately." It shook its head and transformed into a ray of light that vanished into space. It had left. The Samadhi flame had chosen to leave. Yang Yi remained silent. The Samadhi flame had an agreement with him to stay with him for a few years. But it had left now. He didn't hate the Samadhi flame because it was a very normal thing to do. It would never die with him. Now only Nanjing was left here. Of course, he still had Snowy, Su Qingshi, and the others who were within the primordial pagoda. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings, and then he gazed at Nanjing. In his heart, he felt helpless, extremely helpless. Nanjing could leave, but she chose to stay. Now, they were probably going to die together. Yang Yi had done all he could to fight against the undying race. Kill! Suddenly, a furious howl resounded from far away. Yang Yi and Nanjing looked over, and they saw countless charging over. They were the others who hadn't been able to escape. All of them charged at Master Tion's group. A cold glow flashed through Master Tion's eyes. Ants! He was about to attack once he finished speaking, but the stomach of the cultivator at the front of the group suddenly started swelling up. Boom! A moment later, a terrifying wave of energy swept at him. Self-detonation. He hadn't expected that fellow to detonate himself. But just a moment later, a cold smile arose on Master Tion's lips. Self-detonation? They were still ants to him, even if they detonated themselves. However, Countless others started detonating themselves as well. Master Tian was stunned. One after the other started detonating themselves, and countless waves of energy erupted like volcanoes at Master Tian's group. Master Tian's group weren't the only ones who were stunned. Yang Yi and Nanjing were stunned too. Self-detonation. All of them had chosen to detonate themselves. Self-detonation was no joke. It would lead to absolute obliteration. Yet they had actually chosen to detonate themselves. The detonation of a single one of them was naturally no threat to Master Tian's group. After all, it was impossible for them to compare with the universe sprite who'd converged the energy of this large universe. But what if countless detonated themselves? Even Master Tian was visibly moved by this scene. Not to mention the current state he was in, it would be difficult for him to resist even at his prime. Suddenly, the 9 undead warriors appeared before Master Tian, and then they took a step forward and swung their sabers. Hiss! 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 9 rays of saber energy flashed. Everywhere they passed, everything was sliced open. However, too many were detonating themselves. So the converged force of this was absolutely impossible for them to slice apart in an instant. In an instant, Master Tian's group were enveloped by the force of the explosions. Bang! Bang! Explosions resounded incessantly. However, the self-detonations didn't end. One after the other were still charging at Master Tian's group and detonating themselves. Only the sounds of explosions resounded incessantly throughout the world. These explosions continued for almost 2 hours. It was a huge amount of time that they'd bought for Yang Yi and Nanjing. At this moment, Nanjing had recovered by almost 90% with the help of Yang Ye's primordial violet energy. As for Yang Yi, while he wasn't fully healed, he was in a much better state. But he was still extremely weak, and he had less than 30% of his full strength. Meanwhile, the surroundings were gradually calming down. Master Tian and the undead warriors were still there. However, Master Tian's body gradually turned ethereal before Yang Yi and Nanjing, and he vanished completely in the end. If the universe sprite hadn't detonated herself earlier, perhaps Master Tian would have been able to resist these explosions. However, he'd been heavily injured by the universe sprite, so how could he resist the self-detonation of so many experts? Master Tian had vanished, but the 9 undead warriors were still alive. All 9 of them were supporting themselves with their sabers. Obviously, they were severely injured. Their strength could be described as extremely terrifying as they'd been able to survive from those explosions. Could be said that if Yang Yi didn't use his sword domain, then it would be very difficult for him to kill any one of them in single combat. Meanwhile, Yang Yi stood up slowly and took in Nanjing's hand. "Let's go!" They turned around and walked away. The 9 undead warriors didn't try to stop them. While Yang Yi and Nanjing weren't in very good states themselves, the undead warriors were in even worse states. If they fought Yang Yi and Nanjing now, there would only be a single outcome. Both sides would perish together. Once Yang Yi and Nanjing left, the 9 of them sat cross-legged on the ground and were about to start recuperating. However, a phantom suddenly appeared here. The 9 of them reacted very quickly. They instantly converged together and swung their sabers. Hiss! 9 rays of saber energy flashed. At this moment, their saber energy was much weaker than it had been, but it still wasn't weak. However, the phantom ignored their saber energy and just flashed through space. Hiss! 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 In an instant, 4 heads just suddenly flew up into the air. Instant annihilation. 4 undead warriors had been killed with a single attack. The phantom planned to attack again, but a pitch-black finger suddenly emerged from within space, and it instantly descended from above the phantom. Meanwhile, the phantom's figure shook and vanished. The finger hit nothing but air. Retreat! A voice resounded. It belonged to the patriarch of the undying race, Feng Yihan. The 5 remaining undead warriors bowed toward the sky and vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, in the battlefield down below, only around 300 of the 600 undying cavalries remained. As for the spirits of the void spirit race, all of them had vanished. The undying cavalry had won the battle. Once they heard Feng Yihan's voice, "Dugu Juetyin," leader of the Undying Cavalry, immediately led them away. The space where Void Spirit Continent used to be fell completely silent once more. However, the battle far away in space was still going on. Yang Yi and Nanjing entered the boundless reaches of space and traveled to the endless black holes. However, as soon as they arrived there, a phantom suddenly flashed before them. And Nanjing's expression changed, and she slammed her spear down. Bang! And Nanjing was blasted away with her spear. A moment later, Yang Yi felt coldness strike his neck, and it shocked him. He was about to activate the sword domain when a muffled explosion resounded. An instant later, the phantom was over 3 kilometers away. Suddenly, another ray of dark light descended upon the phantom. Bang! That expanse of space exploded apart and was obliterated. But the phantom had vanished. Yang Yi looked up at space. Obviously, Xianxia had helped him. He was about to speak when Xianxia's voice suddenly resounded in his head. Be careful! Be careful! Yang Yi frowned slightly, and he fell silent for a moment before going over to Nanjing's side, and the latter spoke solemnly. What was that? Yang Yi shook his head slightly. I don't know. However, it was clearly not someone from the Undying race. And Nanjing nodded. If it was an expert of the Undying race, they would be dead. Obviously, it wasn't someone from the Undying race. So they had a new problem. Who was that? Who in this world possessed such strength? Yang Yi shook his head and restrained his thoughts. Forget that person. Let's go. Yang Yi led Nanjing to the door of light that led to the Undying race, and then they entered it. The Undying race. It didn't take long for them to arrive in the homeworld of the Undying race. At this moment, it was deathly silent and without even a trace of spirit energy. The large universe had been destroyed, and so had this place. Yang Yi closed his eyes and released his divine sense. It only took a moment for him to finish scanning the surroundings. A short while later, Yang Yi looked toward the side. That way! Let's go! They were about to leave once he finished speaking. They suddenly looked toward the side. A group was shooting over rapidly. They were led by the 5 undead warriors, and the remaining Undying Cavalry and Dugu Juetian were behind them. Yang Yi clenched his fists slowly. However, Dugu Juetian's group didn't attack them. They just shot off toward the side, and there was a slightly solemn expression on their faces. Dugu Juetian glanced at Yang Yi when they passed by, and her eyes had ghastly killing intent in them. But she didn't attack. It didn't take long for them to vanish from Yang Yi and Nanjing's fields of vision. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. What's going on? And Nanjing shook her head slightly. They seem like they're in a hurry, and only 5 of those 9 undead warriors are left. Yang Yi was about to speak when he suddenly looked to the side. A phantom was flickering incessantly like a ghost over 3 kilometers away, and Nanjing and Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something, and their faces gradually turned solemn. It was the same phantom which had attacked them just now. Based on the current situation, the phantom had pursued the experts of the Undying race all the way here. Yang Yi and Nanjing exchanged glances, and both of them were extremely shocked. Yang Yi fell silent for quite some time before he said, Forget it! Let's go! He led Nanjing into the distance. Meanwhile, the phantom didn't go afar Yang Yi and Nanjing, and it just floated there before vanishing after some time passed. Yang Yi and Nanjing arrived at an underground pavilion. It was a gloomy and extremely dark pavilion. The Tomb of Gods. It was the place where the Undying race imprisoned the peak experts from all the races it had conquered. Yang Ye's objective was to look for Yang Wudi. Previously, this place was guarded by the experts of the Undying race, and it was even the undead warriors who were in charge of it. Yet now, no one was guarding it anymore. So they got in with absolute ease. The 2 of them went forward all the way, and it didn't take long for them to suddenly stop. There was a translucent casket on their left, and a middle-aged man laid within it. The middle-aged man had a peaceful expression like he was sleeping. The man wasn't Yang Wudi, and the only reason Yang Yi had stopped was that he sensed sword intent from the man. Moreover, the man had a sword in his arms. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and walked over to it. There were some words atop the casket, Immortal Undertaker, the patriarch of the immortal spirit race. possesses godly attainments in the sword Tao and capable of slaughtering immortals with a single swing. Godly. Yang Yi frowned when he saw that. Few were able to be worthy of such a word, and at the very least he still couldn't. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and looked toward the other side. There was another casket there, and a woman laid within it. Similarly, there were words atop the casket, Fan Tianyin, guardian of the Southern Melody race. With a zither in hand, her music can annihilate all Daos. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings, and he saw a few more caskets. All of them had introductions on them. Yang Yi had a rough guess toward their strengths at this point. They were probably at the true Tao realm. As for their combat strength, perhaps they were merely inferior to the patriarch of the Undying Race and Void Spirit Maiden when both of them were at their prime. As for the gap between them, it was absolutely not huge. They were the Peel experts of other universes. Of course, the most terrifying was the Undying Race. The Undying Race had conquered too many universes, and after Yang Yi came into contact with them, he'd gained a deep understanding of how strong they were. Moreover, he wasn't even facing them at their prime. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and shook his head. "Let's go!" And Nanjing and him continued forward. It didn't take long for them to stop simultaneously. There was a casket not too far away from them, and a person was lying within it. It was Yang Wudi. Yang Yi took a deep breath and walked over with a Nanjing. He placed his right hand on the lid and circulated his profound energy. It didn't take long for the casket to turn ethereal. "There's death energy within him." Meanwhile, a Nanjing spoke abruptly. "The death energy fills him, and it has put him in a state of suspended animation." Yang Yi nodded, and then he placed his right palm on Yang Wudi's chest. After that, primordial violet energy surged incessantly into Yang Wudi's body. Primordial violet energy could be said to be the counter of death energy. Without it, Yang Yi would really be helpless against the death energy within Yang Wudi. Just like that, the death energy within Yang Wudi was gradually disintegrated by the primordial violet energy. A long time passed before the death energy had been cleared completely, but Yang Wudi didn't wake up. "What's going on?" Yang Yi gazed at a Nanjing. The latter frowned and didn't know what was wrong either. Suddenly, a Nanjing said, "Look at his chest." Yang Yi looked over, and he noticed a letter on Yang Wudi's chest. At this moment, it floated out slowly. Yang Yi opened it, and he was stunned on the spot when he read it. The words in the letter read, "Don't disturb me. I'm with your mother." Yang Yi was stunned on the spot, and it was like he'd lost his soul. At this moment, he finally understood why Yang Wudi hadn't woken up. Yang Wudi sought death. Yang Wudi had chosen to die. No one could save someone who wanted to die. Actually, if it wasn't for Yang Yi, Yang Wudi may have chosen to die a long time ago. The reason he'd lived until now was because he was worried about Yang Yi. But now that he'd seen that Yang Yi had grown up, he had no further desire to live. When he fell into the hands of the Undying Race, he knew that maybe Yang Yi would come to save him one day, so he'd left that letter behind. Actually, he would die even without the Undying Race. Yang Yi knelt down slowly while tears suddenly covered his face. Once upon a time, he hated his father whom he'd never met. As far as he was concerned, his mother would be alive if it wasn't for his father. So, he had the desire to kill that father whom he'd never met. But he was wrong, absolutely wrong. Some love could not be seen with the eye. The man before him had done too much for him without saying a word, and he loved both Yang Yi and Yang Ye's mother. And Nanjing glanced at Yang Wudi, and she felt sincere admiration to the man within the casket. The man before her could have gone much further and lived much longer, but he didn't choose any of that. All because the woman he loved was dead. His love was moving. How many in the world could do that? Yang Wudi's strength was inferior to the unfettered one, but he was the only person the unfettered one admired. That was why he hadn't killed Yang Wudi, even when he could. Moreover, he'd even used his sword energy to protect Yang Wudi's corpse. He was a true man. A long time passed before Yang Yi stood up slowly, and then he placed Yang Wudi's corpse within the primordial pagoda. And Nanjing spoke softly, "Don't be sad." Yang Yi shook his head slightly. I'm not sad because his choice is a form of release and happiness to him. Yang Yi suddenly took in Nanjing's hand and said, if it wasn't for all of you, my life would be meaningless too. She tightened her grip on his hand and didn't say a word. Let's go. Yang Yi was about to leave with Nanjing when the latter suddenly said, why don't you use your violet energy to revive the experts here and use them to annihilate the undying race? Yang Yi was about to speak when their expressions changed, and then they vanished on the spot. They were outside the Tomb of Gods when they appeared again, and a towering palm descended upon the tomb and obliterated it. It was gone. The entire tomb and all the experts within it had been obliterated. Yang Yi shot a glance into the sky. Obviously, someone didn't want them to revive the experts in the tomb. It made sense because if all of them came together, it would really not be difficult for them to annihilate the undying race. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to do that. It was truly a pity. Yang Yi shook his head, but it didn't take long for him to feel that it wasn't really a huge pity. Those people had been sealed there for countless years, so even if they were revived, their strength would definitely not be what it used to be. Moreover, it was difficult to know how they would react. Perhaps he would be the first they killed after they were revived. After all, he had a precious treasure like the primordial pagoda, and it was perfect for recovering from injuries. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly asked, where do we go now? Where do we go now? Yang Yi looked up at the sky. Tianxiu and Feng Yihan were still fighting in that distant battlefield of theirs. Help? Yang Yi couldn't help at all in a battle of that level. Not to mention in his current state, he couldn't interfere even when he was at his prime. Unless he could ignite his intents again, then he may be able to be of slight help. But now he could only watch. And Nanjing suddenly said, we have to leave. Leave. Yang Yi shook his head slightly. It's not that easy. And we can't. Presently, the teleportation formation had been closed, so the only way to get through was to reactivate it. But Yang Yi didn't have the ability to do so. No one in the large universe could do it because there was no spirit energy left here. Since they couldn't use the teleportation formation, then tear through space, both Yang Yi and Nanjing didn't possess the strength for that. And Nanjing fell silent too. They had no way forward or back now. Bang! Suddenly, a loud explosion resounded in the sky, and then the entire city started to shake. How dare you! A furious shout resounded, and then a strand of black energy flashed down from the sky. Meanwhile, a black whip shot up into the sky and slammed against it. Bang! The whip shot back where it came from and the black energy was obliterated. Yang Yi and Nanjing exchanged glances, and then Yang Yi spoke solemnly. We must leave the undying race's territory. They vanished on the spot once he finished speaking, but right when they were about to leave, the portal to the large universe vanished. Yang Yi frowned. He looked behind him, and explosions were resounding incessantly far within the city. A battle. There was a battle over there. And Nanjing spoke solemnly. I don't think they closed it because of us. It should be because of that phantom from before. Yang Yi was puzzled. Why? And Nanjing said, if it was just us, they wouldn't have to do that. Their strength is still sufficient to annihilate us. Their true target is that phantom. However, who is that phantom and why did that phantom attack both the undying race and us? Yang Yi shook his head. He was puzzled about that too. The phantom hadn't just attacked the undying race. It had attacked them too. In other words, it wanted to annihilate the undying race and them. Who was it? Yang Yi couldn't figure it out. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. Come. Let's go over and have a look. And Nanjing gazed at Yang Yi and he spoke softly. Let's see who that is. In any case, we can't leave now. And Nanjing thought for a moment and nodded. They vanished on the spot, and it didn't take them long to arrive at the undead tower. At this moment, the 5 undead warriors stood there with their sabers in hand, and the undead cavalry stood behind them. However, only less than 200 of the undying cavalry remained now, and there were almost 60 corpses before the tower. Besides that, Yang Yi noticed that there was a formation below them. It was formed from countless strands of black energy, death energy. The formation was ceaselessly producing death energy that converged into the 5 undead warriors, allowing their injuries and aura to improve tremendously. However, they weren't at their peak. Xianxia thought for a moment as he watched from afar. He had no doubt of the phantom's strength, but if the undead warriors were at their peak, it would be very, very difficult to kill them. Not to mention the undead warriors, if he was still in the state where his intents had been ignited, he wouldn't fear the phantom either. Yet now, perhaps Void Spirit Maiden and the Patriarch of the Undying Race were the only existences in the large universe who could suppress the phantom. The phantom's figure was faintly visible and kept flickering, and the phantom had a whip in its grasp. Swish! Suddenly, the sound of air being torn open resounded, and then a whip tore through space and shot at the undead warriors. Slash! A voice resounded, and then all 5 of them swung their sabers. Hiss! Their saber energy merged into one and shot forward. Bang! A loud explosion resounded, and the saber energy exploded apart. But the whip didn't vanish, and it shot toward the undead warriors. Break! Suddenly, Dugu Juetian's voice resounded, and then numerous spears suddenly tore through the air and shot at both the whip and the phantom. The spears were like a storm, and it was extremely terrifying. The phantom raised its right hand slightly and swept it horizontally. In an instant, the whip rose like a dragon and formed countless whip images in the air. It was like a dance of dragons in the sky. The spears were obliterated before the whip images, and then a huge whip image slammed down from above. This target was the Undying Cavalry, but the undead warriors suddenly appeared in the air. They shook in a row, and then they simultaneously drew their sabers and slashed. Meanwhile, countless strands of death energy converged to them from beneath their feet. Hiss! 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 The saber energy tore through the air and shot at the whip in succession. Bang! 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 Rumbling explosions resounded incessantly. A few breaths of time later, the phantom vanished on the spot, and then the 5 strands of saber energy exploded apart before a whip swept at the undead warriors. Bang! 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 In an instant, all 5 of them were blasted away. The whip descended. Bang! The huge formation on the ground exploded apart and transformed into dust. Dugu Juetian stared at the phantom. Who are you? The phantom flipped its right palm, and the whip returned to the phantom. The phantom gazed at Dugu Juetian and the others, and then an icy cold voice resounded. You're not welcome over there. All of you will die. Over there? Xianxia instantly frowned when he heard the phantom, but it didn't take long for him to understand what the phantom meant. Over there. The initial race. Presently, everyone from the large universe and the Undying Race were rushing over to the universe where the initial race resided. So, what did the arrival of this phantom represent? It represented that the initial race was aware of the situation here, but their attitude toward it was refusal. They refused to accept the arrival of all these people. Xianxia seemed to have thought of something, and his expression turned extremely unsightly. Elder Yuan and the others had entered the teleportation formation. They were in danger. Meanwhile, Dugu Juetian and the others' expressions were extremely unsightly too. Master Gui was the only expert of the Undying Race who'd gone over. So, if the experts of the initial race targeted them, and the rest of them who still remained in the large universe couldn't get over in time, then fate that awaited those already in the initial race's universe was obvious. In the beginning, they had allowed their people to go over first for another reason, and it was because they were confident in their ability to quickly deal with the Void Spirit Maiden and rush over to the initial race's universe. However, Xianxia's sudden arrival, and the self-detonation of the universe sprite and all those experts from the large universe was unexpected to them. As for this phantom before them, it was something they had never expected. The Undying Race's true experts were being kept busy here, so the others in the initial race's universe were absolutely incapable of fighting the initial race. A hopeless situation. At this moment, the Undying Race and Xianxia's side had fallen into a hopeless situation. Suddenly, the phantom vanished, and it was in front of the undead warriors when it appeared again. In an instant, countless whip images enveloped them, and saber energy flickered within them. However, the undead warriors were no match for the phantom now. So, they were blasted away as soon as they clashed. If it wasn't for the help of their patriarch, they would have perished by now. As for the remaining undying cavalry, they were no match for the phantom. Yang Yi looked up at the sky. Xianxia. He could only wait for Xianxia now, and the undying race could only wait for their patriarch. They were the only existences in this large universe who could restrain the phantom now. Of course, Yang Yi was more worried about Elder Yuan's group who'd gone to the initial race's universe, high above in space. At this moment, the battlefield was like an expanse of death. There was no matter here, and ordinary cultivators wouldn't be able to survive here at all. There was no air, space, or energy here. Everything had been destroyed. However, two people were here, and they were Feng Yihan and Xianxia. Feng Yihan stopped attacking, and so did Xianxia. Experts at their level would take weeks to decide on a victory, and it would take even longer to decide on life and death. Feng Yihan held a scroll in his hand as he looked down. "Do you want Yang Yi and that woman to die?" Xianxia glanced at them and fell silent. Feng Yihan continued, "Void Spirit Maiden. If we continue, everyone down there will die, including them. You decide." He closed his eyes once he finished speaking. If they continued, then with Void Spirit Maiden keeping him busy, he couldn't save the undying race at all. So practically all the experts below would die. However, Void Spirit Maiden wouldn't be able to save Yang Yi and Nanjing. Now, it all depended on Yang Yi and Nanjing's status in her heart, and that would decide the fate of countless. Xianxia closed her eyes and fell silent. A long time passed before Xianxia looked down at the remnants of Void Spirit Continent. "The myriad of living beings throughout my Void Spirit Continent are dead, and they can't die in vain. However," she looked down at the phantom and the others there, "we'll deal with the enmity between us later. Let's kill that person first." Feng Yihan glanced at her and replied, "All right." Both of them vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, the phantom looked up abruptly, and then the whip shot up into the air. In an instant, the sky was covered in whip images. However, as soon as a ray of dark light and black light descended, the whip images were obliterated. However, the phantom had vanished without a trace. It had fled. At the instant Void Spirit Maiden and Feng Yihan joined forces, the phantom knew that it had to leave. Any one of them was capable of killing the phantom, and their joint forces could kill the phantom with absolute ease. However, Xianxia and Feng Yihan didn't stop. A ray of dark light and a strand of death energy tore through the air and shot after the phantom. Bang! Bang! Two loud explosions resounded from far away in space, and then that expanse of space was obliterated. Countless rays of starlight were instantly devoured and an expanse of pitch black was formed. Just like that, a long time passed before it returned to calm once more. Meanwhile, Xianxia appeared in front of Yang Yi and Nanjing. Yang Yi was about to speak when she waved her right hand, and they vanished on the spot. Once they left, Feng Yihan appeared before the undead warriors and the others. All of them bowed to Feng Yihan. Feng Yihan glanced at the surroundings and said, "The others should be in trouble. All of you go over and lend them a hand. Try your best to protect as many as you can." Dugu Juetyen suddenly asked, "What about you?" Feng Yihan shook his head slightly. "I can't leave. There has to be an end to the enmity from all those years ago." Dugu Juetyen immediately knelt down. "We're willing to." "Fool!" Feng Yihan's face turned cold. "If all of you stay, you will be of no help to me. But the others need your help right now, and even if they got to the initial race's universe safely, they can't survive without all of you. Remember that Namo Chenyen of the younger generation will be the next patriarch of our undying race over there. All of you must do your best to help him. Besides that, our undying race is far weaker than it was after experiencing the past calamity and this present calamity. So, if all of you survive, look for a place to develop peacefully. Go on. Patriarch." All of them remained on their knees. Feng Yihan looked up at the sky. "No race can prosper forever. This is a challenge to our undying race. but it is an opportunity too. Go on. The others are waiting for you. Dugu Juetian and the others made a deep and long kowtow to Feng Yihan, and then they agreed in unison. Meanwhile, Dugu Juetian hesitated for a moment and said, Patriarch, the portal has closed. We go to the initial continent. Feng Yihan spoke abruptly. There's another teleportation formation there. It's a backup plan that the initial race left. It's activated from the initial race's new universe, so it doesn't require spirit energy from here. So long as that phantom from before hasn't left, the initial race won't close that portal. But Void Spirit Maiden and I won't let that phantom step foot into that portal for now. Dugu Juetian bowed to Feng Yihan again. Take care, Patriarch. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and vanished with the others. Feng Yihan looked up into the starry sky. No one wins. No one won. While the Undying Race had annihilated the Void Spirit Race when it invaded, what was the price it paid? The Undying Race had suffered a severe blow, and most of its experts had perished. Moreover, it lost almost half its population too. The remaining half had been forced to enter into a state of suspended animation. Could be said that the Undying Race hadn't won that battle. Of course, the Void Spirit Race hadn't won either. Both of them had lost. The Undying Race had fallen from the peak, and it fell into deep sleep for countless years. So, its strength was far inferior than what it had been during its prime, and it wasn't able to launch expeditions into other universes anymore. As for the Void Spirit Race, it suffered a fate far worse. It had been annihilated. However, Void Spirit Maiden was alive. So, the enmity wasn't over. Void Spirit Maiden had made a compromise for Xianxia's sake, but he was very well aware that the enmity between them wasn't over. So, even if he didn't want to fight her anymore, it made no difference now. Such enmity would only end with death. Feng Yihan closed his eyes slowly. Based on his strength, Void Spirit Maiden couldn't stop him from leaving. However, if he chose to do that, everyone from the Undying Race would die. So he couldn't leave. Near the door of light in the endless black holes, 3 figures suddenly appeared there. It was Xianxia, Yang Yi, and a Nanjing. Xianxia kept her back toward Yang Yi as she said, Go to initial continent. There's another teleportation formation there. You can go to the other universe through there. What about you? Yang Yi walked over to her. Aren't you leaving? She shook her head. Yang Yi wanted to say more, but she suddenly looked him in the eyes. Live? Everyone wants to live. But what about revenge for the myriad of living beings from my Void Spirit Race? Am I just supposed to forget it? You have your choice and things you persist on, and I have my own. I live with a single objective, and it is revenge. Yang Yi shook his head. Xianxia. Yang Yi. She suddenly shouted angrily and looked him in the eyes with a pair of slightly red eyes. Do you know that I've already made a compromise with the Undying Race just for you? Otherwise, I could have let all of them die today. However, I made a compromise to their patriarch for you, and I let them go. What else do you want from me? Yang Yi was stunned. Xianxia closed her eyes slowly. Go on. The initial race doesn't welcome the living beings of this large universe of the Undying Race. And that's why they sent an expert over here to kill us all. Once you arrive there, you'll definitely encounter danger. You may still be in time to avoid it if you rush over now. As for the affairs over here, Yang Yi suddenly spoke softly. I just want you to stay alive. Her hands behind her back trembled slightly, and then she shook her head and looked up into the sky. Everyone from my race is dead. All of them. All of them died before me. Xianxia turned around and left once she finished speaking. Xianxia had left. She vanished into the distance while Yang Yi and a Nanjing watched. Yang Yi held a Nanjing's hand tightly, while his heart hurt to the extreme. He really didn't want her to make that choice, but just as Xianxia had said, everyone had their own choices, and that was her choice. And Nanjing spoke softly. Let's go. Yang Yi took a deep breath, and then he took her hand and left. Right after they left, Xianxia appeared nearby. She seemed to be lost in thought as she watched them leave. Snowy Yang Yi, if she had any other ties left in this world, then it would definitely be Yang Yi and Snowy. A long time passed before Xianxia shook her head slightly and spoke softly. Will we be able to meet again? Perhaps. She turned around and vanished into space. The initial continent. Yang Yi and Nanjing arrived at the initial continent. Sure enough, there was a towering pillar of light in the huge city on the continent, and it was a portal. The phantom had entered the large universe through it. Yang Yi glanced behind him. Presently, the large universe was covered in desolation, and it wasn't the same large universe he once knew. As for the living beings of the large universe, while some still remained throughout the large universe, only death remained for them. Yang Yi fell silent for an instant, and then he suddenly raised his sword and pointed it at the sky. A sword howl suddenly resounded through the sky, and then it rippled toward the surroundings. At the same time, a voice resounded with it. Come here, come here. Just 2 words. Once he finished saying that, Yang Yi took Nanjing's hand and walked into the huge pillar of light. Everyone who heard these words throughout the large universe rushed madly in the direction of the initial continent. In the teleportation formation, Yang Yi held in Nanjing's hands. White light mixed with lightning flickered all around them. Both of their minds were very clear at this moment, and they could clearly sense everything around them. Yang Yi spoke softly. I hope Elder Yuan and the others are fine. And Nanjing spoke solemnly. They. Yang Yi gazed at her, and she spoke softly. The initial race clearly had a very good understanding of everything that was going on here. That's why they sent their forces over here when the undying race and our large universe were in battle. Besides that, the phantom from before said that we're not welcome over there. So, Yang Yi spoke softly. So they are probably dead, right? And Nanjing didn't say anything. Yang Yi looked up. The ends of his vision were still filled with lightning and white light. He couldn't see the end of this teleportation formation at all. Meanwhile, Nanjing spoke softly. I wonder what the other universe is like. Yang Yi shook his head slightly. I don't know, but we'll find out very soon. Just like that, a few days passed before everything in their vision started to turn ethereal. The white and lightning gradually became scarcer, and they were replaced by specks of starlight. They knew that they were about to arrive on the other side. Yang Yi had been healing like a madman throughout this time, and with the help of his primordial violet energy, he had practically recovered. However, his slaughter intent and sword intent were gone. Completely gone. He didn't really care about his slaughter intent and sword intent as he didn't really rely on it anymore. He relied more on his cultivation and sword domain. While he hadn't advanced into the progenitor realm during the previous battle, he felt that he was at the verge of it. It was like a cup filled to the brim, and just another droplet, just the smallest droplet, would cause the water in the cup to overflow. He was just that close to the progenitor realm. So long as he could take that final step, his strength would undergo a tremendous transformation. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly said, Look! Yang Yi looked up, and he saw 2 figures at the end of his vision. There were people there. Moreover, these 2 people were rushing in their direction. It didn't take long for them to arrive before Yang Yi and Nanjing. It was 2 middle-aged men. They weren't very strong and merely at the sage realm. However, their auras were deep. Obviously, they were sages who hadn't relied on any external forces to get where they were. Meanwhile, one of the middle-aged men suddenly stopped, sized up Yang Yi and Nanjing, and then said, You're from the large universe? Yang Yi and Nanjing nodded. Very good. The middle-aged man asked, Do you know Yang Yi? Yang Yi and Nanjing were quite stunned, and Yang Yi glanced at the middle-aged man. You know Yang Yi? The middle-aged man frowned slightly. I ask, you answer. Understand. Yang Yi frowned, and Nanjing said, Why are you looking for Yang Yi? The middle-aged man gazed at Nanjing. Did I let you speak? Nanjing frowned slightly, and then a spear tore through the air. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and a spear appeared in his grasp too. An instant later, it stabbed against Burning Fury. Bang! Burning Fury blasted open the man's spear and pierced through his chest. Hiss! The middle-aged man's figure instantly stiffened on the spot. Yang Yi glanced at Nanjing. She really has a bad temper. You? Meanwhile, the other middle-aged man gazed at Nanjing with astonishment. At this moment he was simply flabbergasted. Just one attack. The woman before him had actually killed a sage with a single attack. That was also the reason why he hadn't fled. It was because he couldn't escape someone with her strength. And Nanjing gazed at the middle-aged man. Why are you looking for Yang Yi? Yang Yi gazed at the middle-aged man and was extremely curious. The middle-aged glanced at Yang Yi and Nanjing, and then he spoke softly. He has the treasures of my initial race. The treasures of your initial race? Yang Yi frowned. What the heck? When did he possess the treasures of your initial race? The middle-aged man glanced at Yang Yi and remained silent. And Nanjing suddenly spoke coldly. Do you want to die? The middle-aged man glanced at Nanjing with a little fear in his eyes and hesitated for a moment before he said, The primordial pagoda, Bodhi tree, and primordial acts of creation. And Nanjing's eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know that he has those treasures? The middle-aged man replied, The elders said so. And Nanjing asked, And how do they know? The middle-aged man shook his head. I don't know. And Nanjing wanted to ask more. But Yang Yi shook his head. I know how they know. And Nanjing gazed at him and he spoke via voice transmission. I went to the initial continent and obtained the Samadhi flame there, and I met someone from the initial race there too. That person knew about the fact that the primordial pagoda, Bodhi tree, and primordial acts of creation are with me. And Nanjing frowned once more. In this way, trouble was already coming for Yang Yi before he even got there. Moreover, there may be even more trouble coming. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly said, Do you know about the undying race? The middle-aged man nodded. We do. Yang Yi asked, The experts of your initial race are coming over to annihilate the undying race, right? The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment and said, It isn't just for the undying race. It's for Yang Yi too. For Yang Yi too? Why? Yang Yi was very puzzled. Is your initial race afraid of him? The middle-aged man shook his head. Of course not. However, my initial race has to fear those 3 treasures he possesses, especially the primordial acts of creation. Actually, my initial race isn't the only one. The 3 sects and 6 clans are probably aware of it too. I believe it won't be long before their experts rush over too. Yang Yi felt speechless. The initial race sent the 2 of you? And Nanjing suddenly said, Allow me to be honest. Both of you are very weak. The middle-aged man's face became quite unsightly. Don't you know how to be a little easier on people? The middle-aged man was quite angry, but he didn't dare to say anything about it. He glanced at Nanjing and said, We came on our own. Just to gather some information, but we never expected. Yang Yi suddenly asked, Is the patriarch of your initial race strong? The middle-aged man revealed a wisp of pride on his face. Of course, our patriarch is a peak True Dao realm expert. Have you ever heard of the True Dao realm? I'm sure you haven't. Your large universe probably doesn't have such experts. Perhaps you don't even know that the True Dao realm exists. Huh. Yang Yi and Nanjing exchanged glances, and then Yang Yi said, Do you have many progenitors? How many progenitors does your initial race have? A wisp of vigilance flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. Why do you ask? Meanwhile, burning fury suddenly started trembling in Nanjing's grasp, and it caused the middle-aged man's expression to change. He hesitated for a moment and hurriedly said, I don't know the exact amount, but there should be over a dozen. Over a dozen. Yang Yi felt relieved. At this moment, he had a rough understanding of the initial race's strength. The initial race wasn't full of progenitor and True Dao realm experts. Strictly speaking, the initial race wasn't much stronger than the undying race. Of course, it was in comparison to the undying race before it suffered such losses. If the undying race was at its prime, the initial race would seem even weaker. Of course, the undying race was absolutely inferior to the initial race now. Moreover, the middle-aged man couldn't be fully trusted. Every race had its own resources and reserves, just like the undying race. No one knew the undying race had experts like the undead warriors and Xiao Lu before the battle. Suddenly, the middle-aged man turned around and transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the distance. And Nanjing was about to attack, but a powerful aura suddenly swept over, and the entire spatial passageway became unstable before the aura. An instant later, a man appeared before Yang Yi and Nanjing. Yang Ye's expression changed when he saw the man. You! Yang Yi had met the man before him. It was the man he'd met on Initial Continent that day, and it was this man who told him that he had the primordial acts of creation within him. Yang Yi became vigilant. The man before him knew of his ability. The man gazed at Yang Yi first, and a wisp of surprise flashed through his eyes. No one here spoke a word, and the atmosphere here became quite tense. A short while later, the man said, I didn't expect to meet you here. Yang Yi spoke indifferently. If I'm not wrong, you're here to look for me, right? Yes. The man didn't conceal it and nodded. Allow me to be honest, the primordial pagoda, Bodhi tree, and primordial acts of creation belong to my initial race. So, can you return them? Return them. Yang Yi chuckled. According to my knowledge, they don't belong to the initial race, do they? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. So you intend to keep them by force? Yang Yi looked the man in the eyes. So you plan to take them by force? The man spoke indifferently. I advise you to return them. Otherwise, both of you will probably not be able to leave this passageway. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded, and then a ray of sword energy descended from above the man. Bang! He was instantly blasted far away. Once he stopped himself, his hands shook violently, and they were covered in cracks. He'd used his hands to forcefully resist Yang Ye's attack just now. Yang Yi took a step forward and looked the man in the eyes. You're threatening me? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Yang Yi, I know you're arrogant and haughty, but if you don't hand them over, you'll die a graveless death. Not only you, even everyone else who comes over with you will be annihilated. Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot. An instant later, he appeared above the man, and then his sword descended. The sword domain. In an instant, Yang Yi was separated from this passageway, and he was in his own independent world. The man had clearly realized how terrifying this sword domain was, and his eyes opened wide while disbelief filled them. Impossible. Hiss! The man's body was instantly sliced into two. Blood and internal organs sprayed all over the ground. And Nanjing glanced at Yang Yi. You? Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Jinger. This world is too brutal and filled with helpless situations. If you're weak, you die. If you have treasures, you die too because others will try to take them from you. I want to live a peaceful life with my loved ones. A life away from the strife of the world. However, this world doesn't allow it. At this point, I've noticed that the most difficult thing in this world is actually survival. It's too difficult to survive. And Nanjing remained silent. Survival. Since he started his journey on Profounder Continent, how many had died? Too many. The entire large universe had perished now, and countless had perished with it. Survival was a very difficult thing. Meanwhile, Yang Yi took a deep breath. I've figured it out. I want to live in this world, and I want all of you to live well too. So, I'll annihilate everyone who tries to kill us. As soon as he finished speaking, he took in Nanjing's hand and vanished into the distance. The large universe. At this moment, the large universe was an expanse of death, and it was dying rapidly at a visible rate. Meanwhile, two extraordinary experts were fighting intensely here. They were Tian Xiu and Feng Yihan, of course. Could be said that they were the last two living people here. No, there was someone else. A phantom stood silently somewhere down below, and he gazed at the distant battlefield in silence. It was the expert from the initial race. He did want to leave, he just couldn't. If he dared to move, he would suffer the joint attack of those two peerless experts. If that happened, he would have no chance to survive. Both Tian Xiu and the Undying Race's patriarch didn't allow the phantom to leave. Because if he left and caught up to Yang Ye's group or Dugu Juetian's group, their strength wasn't enough to stop the phantom. So, Both Xianxia and Feng Yihan were constantly paying attention to the Phantom. The Phantom was aware of that too, so he didn't dare to leave. He could only wait until an outcome was decided in the battle. A long time later, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared by the Phantom's side. The old man glanced at the Phantom and said, "The initial race is Ling Su." His voice carried a trace of solemnness. The Phantom, Ling Su, glanced at the old man and remained silent. The old man said, "I didn't expect your initial race to send you." Ling Su suddenly said, "I too didn't expect the Grand Elder of the martial sect to come himself." The old man chuckled. "Since we're formed in agreement, my martial sect naturally has to do its best. But I never expected that this large universe would be annihilated before we could even do anything." Ling Su spoke indifferently. "Your true objective is those divine treasures, right, Elder Wuli?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Aren't you the same?" Ling Su fell silent for a long time and said, "I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. That person has left this place." The white-haired old man frowned. "And you didn't go after him?" Ling Su pointed at the battlefield. "I can't." Wuli looked up, and then a solemn expression appeared on his face. "They're really strong." His voice was filled with seriousness. Suddenly, space trembled before them, and then a white figure appeared there. It was a woman. Unfortunately, her appearance was impossible to discern. However, based on her figure, she was definitely drop-dead gorgeous. "White Empress of White Emperor City." The old man spoke solemnly. "I didn't expect you to come too." His voice was filled with seriousness and fear. Ling Su suddenly said, "Are you here for those 3 divine treasures too?" She replied indifferently, "Can't I?" Ling Su spoke solemnly. "They belong to my initial race." The White Empress replied, "It's mine if it's in my hands." Ling Su's face fell. "What's the meaning of this?" She suddenly turned around. "You don't have the right to speak to me. So, just fuck off." Hiss. The space beside Ling Su suddenly tore open, and powerful energy rippled out incessantly. "Want to fight?" She ridiculed. "Ling Su, looks like attaining the true Dao realm has made you very confident. Allow me to tell you that if you dare to take just one step forward, I'll kill you, and your initial race will lose a true Dao realm expert." Ling Su fell silent for a short while, and then he said, "How could I dare to attack you? Please feel free to do as you please. Farewell." He turned around with the intent of leaving. However, as soon as he did that, 2 terrifying auras enveloped him. It was the auras of Xianxia and the Undying Race's patriarch. Ling Su stopped while an extremely unsightly expression appeared on his face. He hesitated for a moment and didn't dare to leave in the end. Meanwhile, the White Empress looked up into the space and spoke softly. "That's the Void Spirit Maiden who was once invincible?" Wuli replied, "Indeed." The White Empress watched the battle for a long time and spoke softly. "She deserves her reputation. I didn't come here for nothing. Unfortunately, she isn't at her prime. What a pity." She transformed into a ray of white light that vanished on the spot. Wuli spoke softly. "I didn't expect her to come too. Who wouldn't want those 3 treasures?" Ling Su continued, "But her true objective is probably not just those 3 treasures." Wuli smiled. "She probably came to have a look at Void Spirit Maiden. It's normal because White Empress is a rare genius in our universe, and she's practically unmatched amongst female experts. Now that the Void Spirit Maiden has reappeared, she naturally wanted to take a look. Unfortunately, Void Spirit Maiden isn't at her prime." He gazed at Ling Su and continued, "Ling Su, I'm afraid your initial race won't be able to take all those treasures for yourselves." Ling Su replied indifferently, "The outcome hasn't been decided yet. Let's wait and see." Wuli grinned. "Then we shall. Yang Yi should be over in our universe now. So farewell." He vanished on the spot. Only Ling Su remained here. Of course, Void Spirit Maiden and the Undying Race's patriarch were there too. In the teleportation passageway, a group was rushing forward madly. It was Elder Yuan's group. A long time passed before Elder Yuan suddenly said, "We've arrived." As soon as he said that, they looked up, and they saw a pitch-black vortex at the end of their vision. It didn't take long for them to enter it. Around 10 minutes later, they left the passageway and arrived on a plains. A huge black vortex stood behind them. After they descended to the ground, there was no joy on their faces, because they saw an old man with a cane and 5 other black-robed figures standing before them. Elder Yuan and the others' faces fell when they saw these people. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, "You're from the large universe?" Elder Yuan nodded. "Yes." The old man said, "According to the information I received, one group of you is from the Undying race, and the others are close friends of Yang Yi. The Undying race has left, so you should be Yang Ye's friends." Yang Yi. Elder Yuan and the others frowned. They actually know about Yang Yi? Meanwhile, the old man suddenly took a step forward. "Unfortunately, Yang Yi didn't come through here, but it's fine because with all of you in our hands, he will come to my martial sect to look for you. I've spread the word that if Yang Yi doesn't come himself in a month from now, my martial sect will hang your heads outside my martial sect until he does come. Of course, you'll be safe until then." Elder Yuan gazed at Sky Maiden and the others. "All of you leave first." He was about to attack once he finished speaking, but the old man suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang! An instant later, Elder Yuan was blasted away, a true Dao realm expert. Sky Maiden and the others' expressions changed. They hadn't expected the martial sect to actually send a true Dao realm expert. The old man glanced at them, and then he pressed his palm down. In an instant, a wave of invisible energy pressed down upon them. In an instant, all of them felt like invisible shackles had surrounded them and immobilized them. "Take them." The old man waved his hand. "They are a little too weak. If it wasn't for those 3 treasures, I wouldn't even spare them a glance." "Yes, Vice Sect Master." The 5 black-robed men spoke in unison. The old man nodded and was about to leave, but he suddenly looked to the right. "There's more." As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared extremely far away to the right. At the moment he arrived there, the space nearby cracked open, and then a middle-aged man in cloud-white robes walked out from there. He was holding a sword. The middle-aged man glanced at the surroundings, and then he gazed at the old man. The old man glanced indifferently at the middle-aged man and said, "An ant from the large universe." He immediately waved his right hand, and a strand of powerful energy rippled forth. The energy was like a storm. Everywhere it passed, shocking ripples surged through space. After he did that, the old man turned around and walked away. He was beyond confident. However, a sword howl resounded, and then the old man stopped abruptly. He turned around, and he saw a ray of sword energy the instant he did that. A moment later, the energy he emanated had vanished without a trace. At the same time, the sword energy in his eyes rapidly grew in size and speed. He'd never seen such a swift attack. It was so swift that he couldn't even dodge it. Hiss! The sword energy shot through his chest, and he was instantly blasted far away. Bang! As soon as he descended to the ground, the old man slammed his cane into the ground. In an instant, the ground below him cracked open, and the powerful force of it stopped the old man from being pushed back even more. The old man glanced at his chest. There was a huge hole there, and a ray of sword energy was still flickering there. However, it was forcefully trapped by a ball of green light. Obviously, the ball of green light wasn't ordinary. The old man looked up at the middle-aged man, and his eyes were filled with fear. Deep fear, and a trace of terror. One attack. If he didn't have that defensive treasure, he would have been killed in an instant. Someone in this world could actually kill him in an instant. But he was a true Dao realm expert. The old man was beyond shocked. Such an expert actually existed in this world. The middle-aged man glanced indifferently at the old man, and the latter's expression changed. "I'm the Vice Sect Master of the Martial Sect. Please forgive me for my offense." He mentioned the Martial Sect to make the middle-aged man fear him. "The Martial Sect?" The middle-aged man frowned slightly. "I've never heard of it." The old man was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man glanced at the ball of green light at the old man's chest. That's quite interesting. Unfortunately, you're too weak. You! He suddenly looked toward the distant sky. Huh? Interesting. He transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the sky. Meanwhile, the old man heaved a sigh of relief, but it didn't take long for quite an unsightly expression to appear on his face. He'd been ignored. The middle-aged man had openly ignored him. As far as he was concerned, the middle-aged man hadn't killed him because the middle-aged man didn't take him seriously at all. It was no different than the decision to stomp on an ant. It didn't matter if a person stomped on the ant or not. He'd been ignored. Ignored like a weakling. A long time passed before the old man took a deep breath. No matter what, he'd survived. Meanwhile, the green ball of light in his chest gradually turned ethereal and vanished. The old man's heart truly hurt from the sight of this. The green ball of light was a protective treasure he'd spent a huge price to obtain, but it was gone, just like that. His heart was bleeding. Moreover, while he'd escaped death, he'd been heavily injured, and it was an injury that would take at least a year or two to recuperate from. The primordial pagoda. The old man suddenly thought of the primordial pagoda. They say that it's a divine treasure for healing. If I had it, these injuries would take just a few days to heal. Moreover, Xianxia still has the Bodhi tree and primordial acts of creation. The old man muttered, and then he vanished on the spot. At this moment, Xianxia and Nanjing were still in the passageway, but their expressions were quite unsightly, especially Xianxia. His face was covered in ghastly killing intent, because they had encountered quite a few experts until now. All of them were coming for him. A long time passed. Finally, a black vortex appeared ahead. Xianxia closed his eyes slowly. Be careful, and Nanjing nodded. A moment later, they entered the vortex. Around 15 minutes later, they felt their feet touch the ground, and the surroundings were calm once more. They opened their eyes, and an extremely old man stood before them. The old man had snow-white hair, eyebrows that were so long they practically reached his chest, and deep wrinkles throughout his face. They simply seemed like they were carved with a blade. He was extremely old. That was Xianxia and Nanjing's first impression of him. The old man glanced at Xianxia and Nanjing. In the end, his gaze descended onto Xianxia. You're Xianxia, right? Xianxia just nodded and didn't try to conceal it. The old man nodded slightly. I'm the vice patriarch of the initial race. I'm here because we are aware of your strength, and ordinary people would only be like whetstones to you. So, in order to avoid unnecessary sacrifices, I've come myself. Xianxia replied indifferently, and the old man glanced at Xianxia. Two choices. 1. You hand those 3 treasures over yourself. 2. I kill you and take them myself. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings. The spirit energy here was much denser than the large universe. Of course, the large universe wasn't much inferior. As for the current large universe, it couldn't compare to this universe at all. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and said, If I hand them over, will your initial race let us live? The old man replied indifferently, We'll keep your corpses intact. Why? Xianxia was astounded. Don't you just want those treasures? Can't we keep our lives and just give them to you? How laughable! The old man replied indifferently, Xianxia, according to the information we received, you're quite an outstanding person. So how could you be so ignorant and laughable? Have you not heard of pulling out weeds by the root? My initial race never leaves potential troubles behind, especially when it's a genius with your talent. My initial race will never let you live, or you may bring unnecessary trouble to my race. Xianxia thought for a moment and said, In other words, giving it to you or not will still end in death? The old man replied, You'll die an easier death if you hand it over. Xianxia's lips curled up into a smile. Are you not confident in yourself? The old man's eyes narrowed slightly while a cold glow flashed through them. Xianxia smiled. You're a true Dao realm expert, so your strength isn't just a little stronger than us, but you didn't just attack. You're asking me to hand it over instead. Let me guess, what are you afraid of? Oh, it should be the primordial acts of creation, right? The old man's face fell. The primordial acts of creation. The initial race had the best understanding of how terrifying it was. All those years ago, it had almost caused the initial race to suffer tremendous losses. Moreover, he'd personally witnessed what happened then. So he was afraid. Of course, he was afraid of the primordial acts of creation and not Yang Yi. If Yang Yi disregarded everything and unsealed it, then he would have no choice but to flee. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly grinned. There's no need to worry. I won't unseal it. I'm serious. I definitely won't. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. You'll be the first to die if you unseal it. Indeed. Yang Yi smiled. So why would I unseal it? Even if I die, I won't unseal it. The old man gazed at Yang Yi for a long time and said, Trying to scare me? How laughable. As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared in front of Yang Yi and slammed his palm down. The powerful energy within his palm caused the space around Yang Yi to warm into an extreme arc. In that arc of space, an independent expanse of space had been formed, or it should be described as a dead expanse of space. At this moment, Yang Yi couldn't rely on anything in this world, including the laws, spirit energy, and everything else. It had isolated him from the world. The world had become a cage. This was the special ability of true Tao realm experts. They could isolate others from the world, and it was no different than crippling the person's strength. Because people relied on the world like the space, laws, spirit energy, and fire elements in the world. However, true Tao realm experts were capable of creating a dead expanse of space that isolated a person from the outside world. This was the difference between experts at the true Tao realm and below, and it was what made them terrifying. If Yang Yi was an ordinary sage, he would definitely die. Not to mention him, even ordinary progenitors would be incapable of resisting this ability of a true Tao realm expert. However, Yang Yi was unlike ordinary sages. A sword howl resounded abruptly, and then an explosion resounded. After that, the old man was pushed 300 m away. The old man glanced at his hand, and there was an extremely deep injury there. He looked up at Yang Yi while disbelief filled his eyes. Impossible! How could you possibly? That's a domain. The sword domain. Your attainments in the sword domain are actually this great. The sword domain. True Tao realm experts could isolate people from this world, but Yang Ye's sword domain could do the same. The only difference was that the true Tao realm's isolation was a form of restraint, and Yang Ye's was a form of transcendence. Transcended the world. The sword domain was a domain of its own. It was a domain that belonged to Yang Yi. So, he didn't have to be suppressed by the special ability of true Tao realm experts. That was why he could kill Xiao Lu with just 3 attacks that day. Of course, the main reason was that he'd ignited his progenitor realm sword intent and slaughter intent. Meanwhile, the astonishment in the old man's eyes transformed into the desire to kill. Amazing! You actually possess such ability. Looks like I absolutely can't let you live. He immediately charged at Yang Yi once he finished speaking. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. I am kind-hearted, but the world forces me to go insane. Kill. I'll kill until there's no one left. I'll kill until blood forms rivers.